Between the Wall Street disaster and the presidential campaign, no one's much talking about the war in Iraq right now. But if you're willing to swim upstream a little bit and pay attention to what's going on there, we suddenly have got a lot more clarity about Iraq right now than we've had in a really, really long time. The Iraqi Prime Minister did an interview on Iraqi state TV last week. It was translated by the U.S. government's own public translation service, opensource.gov. And according to the U.S. government's translation, Maliki said that the final date was really the end of 2010, and the period between the end of 2010 and the end of 2011 was for withdrawing the remaining troops from all of Iraq. But they asked for a change in date due to political circumstances related to the domestic situation in the U.S. So it will not be said to the end of 2010, followed by 1 year for withdrawal, but the end of 2011 as a final date. In essence, he said when he was negotiating with the Bush administration to pick a withdrawal date for our troops to come home, they initially settled on about 15 months from now, the end of 2010. But then, according to opensource.gov, their government translation, the Maliki government says, Prime Minister Maliki says, the Bush administration came back and told the Iraqis they'd actually like our troops to stay in Iraq an extra year through 2011. Why an extra year? Quote, due to political circumstances related to the U.S. domestic situation. So the Prime Minister of Iraq says on tape, according to our own government's translation, that the Bush administration wants to prolong the war in Iraq for an extra year because of our domestic politics. If you feel like your hair is on fire right now, you're not alone. If you're an Iraq vet, or if you're the family member of an Iraq vet, if you're thinking about the prospect of yet another tour of duty in Iraq, not because of any condition on the ground, not because of any national security need, but just because it might be helpful for domestic political purposes here, you have the right to feel like your hair is extra double on fire. We here at The Rachel Maddow Show today contacted the White House to ask for an explanation, a comment, a response. This is what an administration official told us. Quote, you've heard us speak about different kinds of timelines or aspirational goals that may be acceptable. We do not have anything to announce on that. What we're focused on is getting a good agreement, not getting an agreement by a particular date. Stepping back, what we're really pleased about is the fact that we're having these discussions with a sovereign, democratically elected country. Any decisions on troops will be based on the conditions on the ground in Iraq. That's always been our position. It continues to be our position. That's the statement we got from the White House today. If you're keeping track at home, you're right. They are not directly denying what the Iraqi Prime Minister said, which is incredible. What he said is that the Bush administration is keeping the war going an extra year because they think it will be helpful somehow for domestic politics here in the United States. Does John McCain agree that keeping the war going longer makes for good politics here at home? It seems like that has been his take on it in the past.
I don't think Americans are concerned if we're there for 100 years or 1,000 years or 10,000 years.
You know, I'm an American people, and I'm sure concerned about that. The Republicans are convinced that keeping the war going is good for them politically. I think it's a political stinker. I think there's a reason why the tape you've seen over and over and over again of John McCain promising to stay 100 years in Iraq, that's the tape that turns up in pro-Obama ads, not pro-McCain ads. It's because it's a political stinker. So why are the Republicans invested in our troops staying and staying and staying and staying, even to the point of believing war in Iraq is a political winner for them? Well, here, my colleague and pal Keith Olbermann ends his show every night here on MSNBC by stating the number of days that have elapsed since President Bush put on that flight suit and proclaimed mission accomplished in Iraq. Last night's number was 1,972. That's how many days have elapsed since the mission accomplished speech. You know, 1972 is also the year that Iraq kicked out the foreign oil companies. That's when they nationalized their oil industry. And thus, it is a weird numerological coincidence that yesterday was the day that for the first time since 1972, a Western oil company opened up an office in Iraq. And a sobering reminder of the dangers of doing business in Baghdad, the company is not disclosing the exact location of its office. If you're looking for a mission to proclaim accomplished in Iraq, there you have it. Oil companies back open for business. Unfortunately, it's starting to get more and more clear the more news we get out of Iraq that the accomplishment of this mission in Iraq, this is the kind of accomplishment that will keep our troops there longer, not one that lets them come home.